Welcome back, Thrivers, to an amazing episode of the Thriving Equine Professional. So, this guest today is really special, and I am so excited to unpack the journey and to learn more about the Gallop organization, to learn more about what goes on equine wise in the state of New York. I'm excited to learn more about an organization called Vibrant. So, you all are in for a real treat today. We have a truly thriving Gen Z equine professional with us who just graduated like 3 years ago and is doing amazing and epic things. So, Lauren Reischer, welcome to the Thriving Equine Professional, and thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, we are so thrilled to learn a little bit more about your journey. And I know that we haven't had a guest who has near the skills and experience that you do. So this is really brand new stuff, Lauren. So I'm excited to dig in. And with no further ado, first question is, where in New York are you coming to us from?
So I am born and raised in Manhattan, so right in the hub of it all. And about a little less than 2 years ago, I moved up to upstate New York with my boyfriend. We live just outside of Albany. But today I'm coming to you from Manhattan because tonight we have our Gallop NYC barn dance, which is our flagship fundraiser. So that's going to be in Manhattan tonight. So that's why I am reporting live to you from Manhattan.
Yes, I love this. So I wanted you to kind of explain that because certainly you're the first guest that's coming to us from New York City on the Thriving Equine Professional, right? So, Lauren, that's where you got started. And you say that you were introduced to horses at the age of 3. So tell us how that happened.
Sure. So I was born with a condition called cerebral palsy. And basically, how that affects me is that, it has changed for me quite a bit over the years. But, when I was 18 months old, I was diagnosed, and my doctors told my parents that because I was so stiff across my entire body, that they didn't think that I would be able to sit up, I wouldn't be able to walk, I wouldn't be able to speak or even eat food, and that it was only going to continue to get worse with age. So it was a really, really tough prognosis for my parents to get. And, they were more than willing to try anything to push my rehabilitation along. So I had had a few, pretty major reconstructive surgeries, and, I was making significant progress. And at the age of 3, I had a surgery where basically my hips were so tight that it was pushing my femurs out of my hip sockets. So I had a pretty serious reconstructive surgery to reconstruct my entire hip. And the reason why that was so transformative for me was because at that time in my life, my brain recognized my legs almost like a mermaid tail. It only saw them as one and not two individual limbs. So this hip surgery was going to be to train my brain to recognize my legs as separate. I was in a full body cast with a bar that held my legs apart, so it would force them to be separate. And once I sort of came out of the more severe part of the rehab for that, my rehab specialist said to my parents that she recommended that I try therapeutic horseback riding, and that sitting in the saddle with my legs apart and my body moving with the horse would become muscle memory, and it would eventually help my brain to recognize my legs as two separate extremities. So we got introduced to the organization that is now Gallop NYC. And from the very first lesson, my dad brought me, and we arrived on site. The instructor told my dad that, all right, this is the horse that Lauren's going to ride. And down came a Clydesdale. And my dad said to the instructor, she can't open her legs at all. We got to take the saddle off or something and probably just hold her on top of the back of the horse on her knees. And they said, don't worry, this is what we do. And when my dad picked me up onto the horse, my legs went like that for the first time ever. And I sat on top of the horse for a 30-minute lesson. And within 10 weeks starting therapeutic riding, I could take reciprocal steps with a walker. So besides the fact that, it was probably the greatest physical milestone to date for me. I fell in love with horses. I found an activity that was uniquely mine. And, from then on, I just was so hooked. And it's just been a huge part of my life and a major driver for me ever since I started.
I got chills so many times, Lauren, just hearing that story, right? So our listeners know, you and I didn't know each other prior to this Zoom meeting to do this podcast. And as I always say, some of my previous guests become my best recommendations for new and thriving equine professionals. So Kogi Long, who runs the Equine Affair, is who introduced you to me. And I have been so anxious and excited to just hear this story from your mouth, right? Rather than just kind of read and research about it. So just absolutely incredible. Speaks to what we all know and love is the power of the love of the horse
Hmm.
and the power of the horse to heal us inside and out. And the fact that your legs had never separated before being on a Clydesdale at the age of 3 is pretty impressive.
It was definitely really transformative for me. And it was so long ago that I don't really remember my legs being like that myself. But what I do know is that the feeling I have in my body before I get on a horse and the feeling that I have after I dismount is a dramatic difference. I'm so much looser. It as really, besides just the stiffness component, it does so much for me in terms of my balance, engaging my entire body. It's just I feel more whole. I feel like a lot of the time my different limbs sort of operate in silos, and being on a horse really makes my body give that unified feeling.
Yeah, incredible. So you talk about kind of the physical benefits, but Lauren, you also mentioned the socio-emotional benefits. So tell us what that means.
Absolutely. So, growing up, I went to a very, very small Catholic school until eighth grade, and I was the only person in my school who looked like me in terms of nobody else had crutches like mine. There were no other kids in a wheelchair. And, there were times growing up where that was a very isolating experience. And even though my teachers and my school community tried, they definitely tried their best to integrate my activities as much as possible with my peers. Socially, I definitely was behind, not only because of this sort of weird unspoken difference between me and my peers, but also, I was extremely behind in terms of my independence. When, my friends could start to go places together because, New York kids start taking the subway to school when they're 11 years old or so. So, when all of those sort of milestones started to happen for my peers, I was behind. I didn't go away to sleepaway camp for summer. I didn't go and do things by myself. And I didn't participate in the more traditional after school activities like, stick and ball type of sports. So, riding was something that was so unique. Like you said, haven't had a lot of guests on here who've got this strong connection to horses coming out of Manhattan. So for that to be my thing was very, very special to me. And the other piece of it is that when I eventually did transition out of therapeutic riding and I started riding at a hunter jumper barn on Long Island. And the other girls who rode and boarded at that barn, they were my friends. And my differences were completely meaningless to them because the only thing that mattered was our shared love of the horse. And so I got to experience this camaraderie that I didn't really always get to have at school. And, we could all ride together in group lessons and it not matter our varying ability levels because for the most part, we were the same. So, the social emotional benefits were a huge, huge part of my development outside of my physical growth.
Incredible, incredible. And so that hunter jumper career then, as transitioned from therapeutic riding to hunter jumper, Lauren, tell us how you ended up at Brown University on the NCAA equestrian team, and not only on it, but you captained the equestrian team.
If you had told me at 10 years old that that was going to happen to me one day, I wouldn't have believed you. So I grew up riding at this hunter jumper barn. And for the most part, I really only got to ride once a week, twice a week. I didn't have my own horse. So I was a lesson kid for forever. It's all as a bunch of my peers started to lease horses and be really competitive. And, it wasn't, it didn't put any distance between us, but I was sort of left behind in that element. But on the other hand, I got to ride lots of different horses, not being so committed to one that was my own. And, I wanted a horse for forever. I didn't need a fancy European import, I would have been happy with a three-legged donkey.
Yeah.
That's how much I wanted a horse. And my mom, she's very sort of stereotypical kind of Chinese tiger mom, all about school, 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 college grades, SAT, the works. And so we'll call this bribery. I think that's a good description of what it is. But she told me, if you get into an Ivy League school, I will buy you a horse. I said, great, where are we going? And from the first time that I toured Brown, I fell in love. It was the first college that I ever toured. Brown was first, and nothing else compared to it. Every other college I saw afterwards was, is it Brown? No. Is it close to Brown? No. And so I said, I have to go here. I have to. And, a big factor for me looking at colleges was I wanted to make sure that I would still have access to horses. It didn't necessarily need to be in a formal NCAA team, but a club team would have been fine. A place to board nearby would have been fine. But besides the fact that I loved horses so much, it never stopped being therapeutic for me. So I needed access to horses throughout college to keep me fit. That is my physical activity. That's my therapy. It's essential. And so, when we toured Brown, I happened to find out that Brown had an equestrian team. I didn't know anything about recruiting and any of that nonsense. So it ended up that we found out that everybody on the Brown team was a walk-on. They didn't recruit for equestrian at that time at all. So I said, great. If I get to Brown, I'll be happy to try out. And that's what happened. I got in, got my horse, and then I didn't end up bringing my horse to the Brown team, like to board. I boarded him someplace separate, but I tried out for the equestrian team. They could not have been more welcoming. And what's so great about, so Brown chose in the IHSA, and what's so magical about the IHSA is that you've got riders from walk trot through the open division, and every single rider at every single ability level contributes equally to the success of the team. Brown doesn't have to waste any money on riders riding the bench because they're not as advanced. That rider, matters just as much as a 3-foot rider. And so I was able to come in. I think I showed in limit flat or something like that. And, it was so rewarding. And it was the first time I experienced equestrian as a team format. And when you have a barn that you show with, they are your team. But this was more in the traditional sense, where you're counting on one another's performance, whereas you might be in a barn with somebody that you show with and you might compete against that person and you're still teammates. But it was so amazing to have that community, and it unlocked all of the endless resources that Brown Athletics had to offer for student athletes to me that I never would have known about. So it was such an incredible experience. And then what was crazy, moving even forwards down the road, is that I had been named co-captain in more or less March of 2020, right? When everything fell apart.
Yeah.
And less than 2 months later, we found out from Brown Athletics that they were cutting equestrian along with 11 other sports from the roster of teams, not to save money from COVID draining the budget, but because of this new commitment to make their roster of teams as excellent as possible, right? And we sort of read that as the high ROI sports. And, what the truth was that equestrian had the second lowest cost per athlete, second to track, right? Which when you think about it, is really just a pair of sneakers.
Right.
And so we had the second lowest cost per athlete, and we were one of Brown's winningest teams. So the idea of us not being excellent enough was not going to last. And so, my first sort of order of business as co-captain of the team was to start this campaign to get the Brown equestrian team unconditionally reinstated. And, we were competing with 11 other teams for a very small number of possibilities to be reinstated. And there were, Title IX issues involved and whatnot. But ultimately, the team was reinstated, and us and one other team, and I don't remember which one it was anymore. But, we enlisted the help of the USEF, of the USHJA. We got them involved. We brought them to Brown Athletics to lobby the athletics department to reinstate the team. And what I tried to explain to our director of athletics was that if he would cut the football program, would the NFL be on the phone with you guys? No, probably not. And so it just underscored this amazing fact, which is that the USEF cares about riders at all levels of the sport, not just those at the top. And so, Brown was this amazing experience for me, not only because I got to ride competitively, found this amazing community, but it also opened my eyes to advocacy within the equestrian world, which was sort of the first taste I had for that outside of, volunteering and doing fundraising for Gallop NYC.
Yeah, so incredible. There are a few things that we need to point out there, right? And not the least of which is, Lauren, I'm not sure you shouldn't be a lawyer. Like that could be a career option as well. Maybe sometime in the future. I'm sure your mom would appreciate that as well. So
She sure
thanks,
would.
thanks, mom, for getting the horse, once you made it to Brown. And then the other thing, I always ask my guests to make sure that we are explaining our acronyms. We've talked a lot in different episodes, Lauren, about IHSA, but go ahead and let's just let our listeners know, what is IHSA, USEF, and USHJA? You mentioned all
Sure.
three of those acronyms. Yep.
So the IHSA is the Intercollegiate Horse Show Association. That's sort of the governing body for intercollegiate equestrian sports. Then there's the USEF, that's the United States Equestrian Federation. They are the national governing body of equestrian sports of many, many different disciplines, and everything from the hunters and jumpers to dressage, reining, driving, all kinds of things. And then the USHJA is the United States Hunter Jumper Association, which is discipline focused.
Yes. And, I love to point those out because this is all about opening the eyes and opportunities for younger people, the 5 year ago Lauren or the 10 year ago Lauren, to say, oh my gosh, there are all these jobs out here, all these opportunities, right? And so those organizations have many roles, USEF and
Mm-hmm.
the USHJA, there are roles within those organizations. So I just always like to make sure our listeners kind of know what we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about there. But your journey through your collegiate experience and the action that you took and the leadership that you took, really, quite frankly, during a challenging time, as you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
like no one, we get tired of talking about the pandemic, but I think you graduated in 2021. Is that correct?
I did.
Yeah. So that changed the game your senior year, I'm quite sure,
It
of
did.
kind of what was going on and how you were going to navigate what I call the student to professional transition.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about that. You go through all your 4 years, you're captain of the NCAA equestrian team at Brown. And then what was your plan?
So when I was at Brown, I double majored in education and public policy. I came out of, I went into my senior year thinking I was going to leave Brown as some type of high school administrator. And what I ended up really realizing to myself is that while that could be rewarding, I think it would be a better fit for me to work in the nonprofit space. Not only because of the vast experience that I had campaigning and fundraising and doing behind the scenes work for Gallop NYC. But also, there are so many, it's working in the nonprofit space has so many different opportunities for collaboration and to grow partnerships. And so, this was not by design, but in a way it sort of was. I came out of Brown and I started working for the Special Olympics New York. Which is, it speaks to two very important parts of my life. One being advocating for athletic opportunities for people with disabilities. And, it wasn't until I got to that career that I found that the Special Olympics had an equestrian program. So I said, great, let's make this a front running program for the organization. I've got a Rolodex of connections and I want to grow support for it, and it just was a magical experience. What a way to come out of college and enter a career where you are not in banking, working until 3 a.m, wondering when you're going to see the sun. I got to go to work every day knowing that what I was doing, had a measurable impact. It was something I was passionate about, and it kept me going.
That's incredible. And so tell us, you've mentioned now, we need to talk about Gallop NYC, right? But first, let me stop because I always do point out that you just told us you were a double major, right? And it was not equine. So you were on the equestrian team. And I always just like to explain that, Lauren, because there are so many young people out there who might not be majoring in equine, but have a passion for the industry, for the horse. There are so many careers out here that you do not
Hmm.
need to be an equine major. And quite frankly, any kind of a business major is generally a competitive advantage. And
For
so
sure.
I want to point that out. Do you have any
Yeah,
comments
and
on that?
Absolutely. You know, the thing is, I hope this doesn't discredit me, but the truth is, if Brown had had an equine major, there's no question I would have added that, or would have tried to do that and something else. Like it's too irresistible for me. It's a good thing I didn't go to a school that had that. Um, and on the other hand, you know, maybe I was able to sort of satisfy the temptation a little bit because I had so much access to horses, being on the team, having my horse boarded. Yes, there certainly can be value in doing an equine major, especially if it's leading you to a pre-vet. You know, outside of that though, I do agree that you are probably better served to do a non-equine major. You know, you don't need to be a rocket scientist, but something that can serve you while you are developing, you know, your equine potentially career or continuing on with your hobby or something to carry you. You know, it's no secret to anybody that equestrian sports is by far one of the most expensive out there. And you are not going to come out of college and work in an equine field right away that's going to be able to support your horsey dreams. You know, that's not really a realistic expectation for, you know, a first year grad,
Right.
unless you've got a support system behind you who's going to take care of it. So definitely in your best interest to pursue a non-equine career. It can, you know, and one of the things I'll even say, if you're not sure, or if you're doing an equine major and you're adding something else to it, a secondary or a minor, strongly recommend something that involves a lot of reading comprehension and writing. You know, I feel like in a lot of ways, math and math principles can be taught, but the ability to process information that you read and then write about it is essential to so many different fields. That was what I took away mostly from a double major in education and public policy. Public policy involved a lot of complex writing, memos, briefs, long research papers, you know, capstones and whatnot. And the education major taught me how to summarize it simply, not to need all the big and old timey words that you might find in a brief that you'd be writing for like Congress, right? But to read what you to understand what you read and put it simply. And so that has so many that skill has so many different applications no matter what field you end up going to, marketing, business, anything. That even if you're, you know, I think that is something that I would urge, you know, anybody coming out of college to strive for.
Yeah. Great advice and really different, Lauren. We haven't heard a lot of that, you know, the focus on comprehension and reading and, you know, critical thinking, those kinds of things. So we've talked a lot about the value of business, but I really appreciate your advice towards the reading and writing and comprehension.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Definitely.
it's important. All right, so let's get to Gallop. Tell us about Gallop.
So Gallop NYC is a nonprofit that serves riders with a mix of physical, developmental, sensory disabilities. When we serve kids, teenagers, adults, post-combat veterans, senior citizens. We've got workforce development programs, corporate volunteering opportunities. We're based in the 5 boroughs of New York City. So we have a home base barn in Queens, right near JFK Airport, that we're so proud to call our own. We've got about 20 horses on the facility. We've got a rodeo-sized ring. The facility used to belong to the Federation of Black Cowboys, and so you know, it's interesting to come and do therapeutic riding in a rodeo-sized arena. And so we just have this amazing property. And before COVID, we were serving more than 650 riders a week. We're very lucky to have, you know, a facility that can not only accommodate, you know, so many horses and thereby so many riders, but, you know, one of the things that I've talked about when I've been explaining why urban therapy programs are so important but need to be handled correctly is because, you know, cities, especially ones like New York City, you know, since humankind no longer relies on horses for transportation, urban areas are no longer meant to be compatible for horses living there. And so we, you know, we take great pride in how we manage our facility, how we take care of our horses. You know, we make sure that they have plenty of access to turnout and that the quality of their lives is not compromised by being in an urban area. And so, you know, the horse is really the backbone to a successful therapy program. Yes, volunteers are essential. Yes, this, that, and the other. But a happy and sound horse is essential to making sure that they can provide those therapeutic services to the rider. So pre-COVID, at capacity, we were offering about 650 lessons a week, which is, really, really incredible. And so we have worked really hard since the pandemic to get back up to those numbers, climbing every day. And we're doing what we can to maximize efficiency and make sure that we can take as many riders as possible off of our wait list. But that's really our focus, is focusing on, there are 200,000 plus kids in the New York City school system with an IEP, an independent education plan, that have some type of special needs or disabilities of some kind. And so imagine if all 200,000 of them had access to the magic of therapeutic riding. And so our goal really is to maximize the number of riders that we can serve.
Wow. Just incredible. And so you mentioned that that really is the original organization that you've been involved with since you were 3, and now you are actively involved as a young adult.
Yes, definitely. I think it was not this past May, but the May before, I became part of the board of directors, which I believe that I'm the first Gallop NYC alumni to do so. And it's been great to, even when I stopped doing therapeutic riding, I was always involved with Gallop. I would go and volunteer, I would help school horses, I was involved in fundraising. And so now being on the board of directors, it's been really valuable to sort of look behind the curtain and see what's involved, and trying to make sure that we are running an organization that is as inclusive and also as efficient as possible.
Yeah, just super incredible. And I would have to say, maybe not only are you the first alumni of the program to sit on the board of directors, but also you are, my guess would be, one of the youngest, if not the youngest member of the board of directors. Yeah.
You're right about that.
Yes. Yeah. So, and I just love to give that shout out because I am so passionate about sharing this Gen Z energy, right? Like,
Hmm.
you have a lot of energy. I use the word impact. You are clearly, Lauren, making an impact on the world around you and the people that you love and the people and the causes that you care about. And so I think that, that's what we really want to celebrate as well, because the more we can encourage our young, our Gen Z, any of us really, that's the one word that permeates across all 4 of the current generations in the workplace, is we all want to make an impact. So we don't have to be fighting with each other about what Gen Z does versus what the baby boomers do, or Gen X or millennial. It
Exactly.
doesn't matter. We all are here to make an impact. And you as Gen Z are really bringing that to life. So
Hmm.
I think, again, that is, certainly to be celebrated, all the work that you're doing. So you
Yeah.
sit on the board of directors for Gallup, and you have worked with the Special Olympics. Do you also coach the Special Olympics equestrian team? Let's add
I
another
do.
list of duties.
Yes, I do. I started doing it more formally once I stopped working with Special Olympics, but to this day, still very involved with the Special Olympics equestrian program. I helped to create this pioneer, or I don't want to say pioneer. It's a pilot program where we wanted to bring the Special Olympics athletes and give them the opportunity to compete at hunter jumper horse shows, just as the rest of the mainstream equestrian community does. And so we partnered with the Saratoga Horse Show, with Hit Socrates and the Hampton Classic, to offer an exhibition division. So it's not a governing body rated or regulated, appointed division. We can sort of run it as an exhibition to that show. So created, I created very specific rules and other specs for how these classes were going to run. And we basically went to these shows and said, can you squeeze us into your prize list and on your facilities? And they said yes. So we were able to bring riders to these horse shows. We brought them for, 3 or 4 days, as most horse show goers do. And they were able to experience sharing the schooling ring with, the adult hunters and with the people and with trainers schooling horses for their clients. And that is very much a unifying experience for riders with disabilities that they don't always get. I was lucky enough that I had it growing up in a hunter jumper barn, but part of what the attraction of this program is that when I was working at Special Olympics, one thing that we sort of found as a trend was that as riders were getting to a jumping level, they would often leave the program because they didn't have the competition opportunities to match the rising ability levels of the riders. And my thought was, this is such an amazing program. It's cost free to all the athletes, which takes away a huge economic barrier to entering the sport. Why should they be leaving this program just because they're excelling? It's like punishing them for doing well at their sport. And so this is what we did. It was this program to, it's almost like a continuing education. We are going to create more programming to match your rising ability levels. And so the first year we had 4 or 5 riders who showed in sort of like a short stirrup class, which is cross rails, 18 inches. And so they had the option to either trot or canter the course. There weren't set strides in the line so that people could take as many strides as they need. And we just had it very simple, very inclusive. And then, by year 2, we doubled the number of riders and the number of classes offered. We had a walk pole derby for riders that, are able to display 2-point positions and navigate a course, but are only doing it at this stage at a walk. They had the opportunities to go and compete at these shows too. So it was really amazing. And we sort of had some complications this year. So we haven't had the chance to put on these shows so far in 2024, but we're hoping to bring it back in a major way in 2025.
Wow. Just simply incredible. And so I know there are going to be so many listeners that are interested in what you're doing. I'm just so excited that we're getting to share these things. So next step is, let's talk about Vibrant and what you do today as I'm going to call it, one of your jobs, but maybe this is kind of your full-time job in addition to Gallop, in addition to the Special Olympics. You've got a lot going on, but let's talk about this role, because this is really special as well. And it speaks to a need across the country, across all kinds of demographics, generations, work, careers. Like, let's talk about what you do.
Mhm. So everybody knows that in an emergency, you dial 911. Not everybody knows that if you are experiencing a mental health crisis or are contemplating suicide, you can dial 988 and 9881 for veterans. So 988 is the National Suicide Crisis Lifeline. It is free. It is not only calls, but texts, chats, and emails as well. It's 24 hours a day. It's completely confidential, free to all users. Vibrant is the power behind 988. Not only are they the power behind 988, but about a dozen other relevant hotlines. Hotlines relating to substance abuse, domestic violence, gambling, other addictions, a whole array, natural disaster relief. So it's really an organization that is focused on improving accessibility of mental health and emotional well-being resources. So that's what Vibrant is about. And I am the director of the annual fund. So the annual fund oversees all donations unrestricted from $0 to $50,000. So if you make an unrestricted gift to Vibrant, you let us determine where your donations are best served. You can elect to donate directly to 988. You can elect to directly donate to any one of our other programs, but I oversee unrestricted donations to Vibrant. That's my day job.
So how did you get there? Tell us a little bit about how you ended up at Vibrant in this role.
Mm-hmm. So my job at Special Olympics was as a director of development. And so my background in doing fundraising for Gallup set me up to be successful at Special Olympics, and I really got to, out of college in a much more formal way than in a volunteer capacity, work on cultivating corporate partnerships, soliciting high profile and high net worth donors, event planning, grant writing, grant reviewing, working on, development marketing and holiday appeals, mailers. And so all of these basics, these basic tenets of what makes a successful development department, I really got to hone in on those skills. It was really, really, a well-rounded opportunity for me. Peer-to-peer giving, holiday giving, matches, all of those sorts of things. And, I eventually left the Special Olympics because I felt that an essential piece of my experience was missing, which was sort of marketing in a formal way. And if you really think about it, development is how well can you market your organization to get people to give you money for nothing, right? It's not like they're buying a service or not buying something that gives them an immediate gratification. When you make a donation, it is for them. So how well can you market the resources and the programs that your organization offers? So I went to the American Thoracic Society, which is a membership organization for lung doctors, to put it broadly. So it's a mix of lung doctors, professors, researchers, other clinicians. And so I got my marketing experience there. I worked a lot on digital campaigns, social media management, SMS marketing, really, really a surprising fit for something like what I was looking for. But it was very, very strategic. And so I was with the American Thoracic Society for about a year and a half, specifically focusing on marketing before I found myself at Vibrant. And I've been at Vibrant since May.
That's incredible. And just, what a worthy call. So it truly speaks again to your passion, fundraising, nonprofits, where your background and your heart is. So I want, though, to hear from you, Lauren, in your position. Share with our Gen Z listeners your tips for entering the workforce, because I think you have a few of those, and there is no one better, I feel like, to give us some tips on Gen Z entering the workforce than Lauren Reischer.
Here's one thing I will say. I think that this is probably going to be the most resonant. When you are in high school and college, what you do with your summers matters a lot. For, you know, there's absolutely nothing wrong with when you are 14, 15, 16, spending your summer to go to sleepaway camp, to be a counselor, to be a CIT, whatever the rank is. Super valuable, and that it teaches you about independence, responsibility for others, all of that, project management. But what I would say is that, you know, you have to wonder, if you're trying to prepare a career for yourself, is my summer best served by me lifeguarding, babysitting, working in an ice cream truck? And it's all of those things are great jobs for you to earn cash that you can bring with you to college. But is it going to serve a long-term career for you? Because what Gen Zs find is that when they leave college, entry-level jobs often require 1 to 3 years of experience. And where are you getting that from if you are spending your summers in college or in high school, doing those sorts of activities? Not that there's anything wrong with it. It's okay to make money that way. But perhaps if you're going to spend your summer focusing on, being an Orange Theory fitness coach, if you're going to, any of those types of activities, that maybe what you ought to do is to supplement it with some type of either internship or something else that you can really use to focus on your career in some way like that. I think that's probably my biggest tip for Gen Z, is that if you can start to build your experience during your summers, during high school and college, you will come out of college being able to get into a more than an entry level job, or at least that, given the new standards for what entry level really means.
Such incredible advice, because one of the platforms, Lauren, that I spend a lot of time on a soapbox about is, that, and I'll say it this way, our academic institutions are not well preparing many of our students for the student to professional transition.
Mm,
And that's part of it. Part of it is that individual responsibility, and the power of internships is real. The power of building your network, I think that comes from those truly career oriented internships and jobs and roles that you can take advantage of during
hmm.
those summers or other breaks that you have. You have to begin doing that sooner than your junior year of college, expecting to step
Absolutely.
out of school and get, a 60 plus $1,000 a year job. It just doesn't work that way, right? You're
Hmm.
not ready because you don't have the skills, and to your point, you don't have the experience.
Exactly. It's just maybe that was realistic at some point in history, but not today. There are too many skills, especially, required to enter an entry level job these days, that you need to show a certain mastery of them even when you're leaving college.
Yep, without question. And many of those skills are very people related. It's your ability to be emotionally intelligent in regard to interacting with people who are older than you, who are ahead of you in
Hmm.
roles and in leadership and management roles. So I just couldn't agree more. What great advice coming from a very recent grad who is, truly thriving in her early career. So, Lauren, there's so much to talk about, but a couple of questions that I think are going to be rich advice as well from you. Do you have a particular book or podcast, maybe more than one, but what would you recommend to our listeners and why?
Oh man, I gotta think. Okay, this might sound kind of corny, but I really believe this. I love watching Shark Tank. There might be theories about certain things in Shark Tank being orchestrated ahead of time or whatnot, whatever the case. You are watching a high pressure situation real time where your business, your career is on the line. And it is a matter of how you present yourself, your skills, your product, whatever it is that you're bringing to the Shark Tank. And, you can either learn to overcome defeat or not. You can learn to take their feedback, even, harsh or cruel as it might be, and transform your company into something valuable. So I think that that's one that is going to be easy, an easy grasp for folks who might
Yeah.
be listening to this rather than a specific book or podcast because it's on TV all the time. So I think, you can, especially if you struggle with public speaking, that could be a great way to figure out by listening to some of those other folks who give presentations what your style is.
Yeah. I love it. Okay, we're going to watch Shark Tank. That's the recommendation today. I love this. All right. And then my other question for you, Lauren, I mean, clearly you have a pretty full plate, right? So you are a young professional. You have a lot of volunteer responsibility as well. You have a significant other and a puppy and horses. And so I always ask this question, but especially again to remind our listeners that you are in the first 5 years of your professional career. And so, what advice would you give on what I call life balance, right? It's the multiple roles that we have in our lives, whether that's our job or career or being a dog mom or a horse mom or a partner or whatever that is. Do you have some advice around life balance, Lauren, that you would give our listeners in the face of today's hustle culture?
It's important. The truth right now, I'm very lucky in that working for Vibrant and being a mental health organization, they very much practice what they preach for their employees. So I'm lucky that I don't have to feel this pressure on a day-to-day basis to keep the laptop open after 5 if that's not what suits me. So it's about knowing where you are in your projects. I think it's reasonable to expect that you have to put work first, right? Your career is so important to you, or it should be. So work first and then trying to figure out how to manage everything else. I'm not somebody who is willing to compromise on the hours or the quality of my work because of something else that I'm going on because I didn't manage my work well. One, this is not so much of like a work-life balance question answer, but I'm going to change it a little bit to give a specific example. When I knew it was time for me to leave the American Thoracic Society, I said, I need to start applying to jobs. And for some people, finding a new job can take months.
Yeah.
It can take half a year. It could take a year. That's just the nature of the job market today. And the reason why this is relevant to your question is two parts. One, a little nugget of advice: don't leave your job until you have a new job. It's way harder to get a new job it's way easier to get a new job while you have a job. And two, you have to make time for applying. If you think that you're going to get a new job in several weeks applying to 1 or 2 jobs a day, it's not realistic. That means that you might need to wake up early before work and apply to jobs. You're sitting on the subway in Manhattan getting someplace. You might sit on your phone for a minute and apply to jobs, easy apply on LinkedIn. It's your responsibility to carve out time and do some prioritizing to figure out when you're going to make time to finding a new job. A new job is not necessarily going to find you. And so the reason why I think this matters so much to your work-life balance is that, depending on how badly you think you need a new job, you're going to have to make sacrifices. You might have to, give up your hour or two a day that you play video games, or you watch TV, or you take lessons, or you might have to scale back going to the barn. There are just certain sacrifices that you're going to have to make, to establish yourself, your career. And it's going to be tough. The truth is, I don't ride as much today as I used to because I have to make room for my professional life. And it is sometimes heartbreaking, but I know that if I do it now, I'll have an easier time getting back to it at an amount that suits me later. So, that is another piece of advice, is just that, as you're searching for your next step in your career, just to be realistic about what it's going to take for you to find a job. Applying to, one or two or three jobs a day is just not going to be enough if you're needing a drastic change soon.
Yeah, great advice, because it really is. And I've said this before, finding a job is a full-time job. So if you just look at it that way, and going in, it is as much about applying and writing the cover letters and making sure you have a great resume as it is about being on LinkedIn and making sure you're active there, as it is about building your network and reaching out to people who are, doing things you're interested in doing, working for organizations and brands you're interested in knowing more about. And so really great advice there, that it is a commitment of your time to find a fulfilling role for what you want to do and who you intend to be at that moment in your life.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So exciting. So I know, Lauren, that people are going to want to learn more and find you. Of course, you and I are connected on LinkedIn, and that is an important platform for me, and encouraging our younger listeners to be there. If they're not there, get there. But give us the other places where they can find you and the organizations that you love. You've got some websites, and so send them where they need to go.
Absolutely. Yes, listeners are more than welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can email me. It's just my first and last name at Gmail. Same thing. I'm really big on Instagram, at Lauren Reischer on Instagram. And then, if you want to learn more about any of the organizations that I've mentioned, we've got gallopnyc.org, specialolympicsny.org. You should definitely go and check those out. We've got vibrant.org. Tell a friend about 988. It's free. You can just call or text anytime. And, my inbox is always open, and I'm happy to connect with folks.
I love it. And you are now a presenter at Equine Affair. I didn't want to leave without mentioning that. So you were just there at Equine Affair when this episode publishes. And I want to give a huge shout out to Kogi Long for recommending and connecting us also, because this has just been so rich. And I am so just happy to be connected with you, Lauren. And I will look forward to an opportunity that we get to be live and in person and meet one another. So Thrivers, thank you for being here. We will see you back here same time next week. Lauren Reischer, you have been incredible, and we are so thrilled and humbled to have you on the Thriving Equine Professional.
Thank you for including me. This is awesome.
Awesome. Have an amazing day, listeners. We'll see you next week.